What do you do when your wife looks you in the eyes and tells you to file for divorce if you don't like her week-long trip with just a friend? How do you answer when everyone around you laughs and calls you weak for staying? This is how I quietly prepared, so that when she strutted back home, tanned and smug, I could point to her suitcases by the door and tell her to get out. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Daniel, and most people would say I live a quiet, ordinary life that does not really interest anyone. I wake up early without an alarm, because my body knows the rhythm by now. I stand in the small kitchen of our apartment, boiling water for coffee, moving slowly so I do not wake Lena too early. The kettle hums, the cheap cabinets rattle a little when I close them, and for a few minutes it is just me, the smell of instant coffee and the sound of traffic far below our window. I prepare my own lunch on automatic pilot, a simple sandwich, an apple, a small container of leftovers from last night. I put everything in the same old lunchbox I have carried to work for years. The plastic is scratched, but it has never failed me, a bit like me in this house. When I hear Lena's phone vibrate in the bedroom, I know she is slowly waking up. Not because she wants to greet the day, but because her friends are already active in group chats. Her world starts with glowing screens, mine starts with kettles and spreadsheets. She walks into the kitchen wearing an oversized t-shirt and no expression, eyes half on me and half on her phone. She barely looks up when she passes me to reach the fridge. I say good morning in a normal, gentle tone, and she responds with a quiet sound that might be a greeting or might just be air leaving her throat. She pours juice into a glass, still reading her messages, and then complains that we never go anywhere nice. She says other couples take short trips on weekends, eat brunch at new places, drink cocktails after work. I listen, stirring my coffee, and do not remind her that I was the one who paid off the apartment, and that those trips and cocktails cost money we do not exactly have floating around. Instead, I say that maybe we can plan something when my current project at work is finished. She sighs deeply and tells me I always have a project at work and that I am married to my computer. It is not the first time she says that. I swallow the familiar comment and let it pass, because if I push back, the morning will explode into a small argument, and I will go to work feeling heavy. I have learned that it is easier to carry quiet sadness than loud conflict, at least for a while. After breakfast, I put on my simple shirt and the same dark jeans I wear most days. At 42, I do not care about fashion trends. I care that my clothes are clean and not torn. Lena, on the other hand, can spend 10 minutes just choosing earrings, another 20 perfecting her makeup, even if she is just going to her office. Image matters to her in a way it never really mattered to me. On my way out, I tell her I will be late because we have a system upgrade in the evening. She rolls her eyes and jokes that the server is my real wife and that she is just the roommate who sometimes gets attention. Then she laughs at her own line and types something into her phone, probably sharing it with her friends. I close the door quietly and remind myself that she used to say my stability was attractive. Somewhere along the years, stability turned into boredom in her eyes. At the office, the day is a normal mix of small problems, user tickets, and quiet jokes passing between cubicles. I am the older guy in the IT department, the one people trust when the system goes down, but they do not invite me to after-work drinks very often. Some of them say they respect me because things run smoothly under my watch. Others add, with a grin, that my life must be very simple. Home, wife, computer. One of the younger developers asks me if I ever get tired of being domesticated. He says it like a joke, but it lands wrong in my chest. I smile and tell him that peace is not such a bad luxury. He shrugs and says he would die of boredom if he lived like me. To him, my life is a comfortable prison. To me, it was supposed to be a safe harbor. After work, I receive a message from Lena asking me to meet her and her colleagues at a bar downtown. She writes that they are already there and that I should not dress like an office ghost. The comment stings, but I tell myself it is just her style of humor. I go home first, take a quick shower, put on a clean shirt that fits a bit better, and catch a tram to the city center. The trendy bar is noisy, full of exposed brick walls, industrial lamps, and laughter. Music beats from hidden speakers, and the air smells like perfume, beer, and something sweet I cannot name. I spot Lena at a tall table with several people from her agency. She is standing close to a man I recognize from photos she has shown me before. This is Mark, the colleague she calls just a friend whenever his name comes up. He is taller than me, muscles clearly displayed through a tight shirt, his hair perfectly styled. He looks exactly like the kind of man who enjoys being noticed. When she sees me, Lena waves lazily and introduces me to the group as her husband who lives in the server room. Everyone laughs. I force a small smile, shake hands, and try to ignore the way Mark's hand stays on her lower back a moment longer than necessary. Mark tells me he has heard that I am the reason the systems never crash. He says it with a half smile, like it is a compliment and a small insult at the same time. He jokes that someone has to keep the boring things running so the fun people can make magic in marketing. The others laugh again, but not in a cruel way. It is more like an easy, comfortable habit. They are used to laughing at the idea of someone like me. I order a simple beer because that is what I like and because I know what it costs. Lena and her friends order something colorful and complicated that comes in tall glasses with fruit and little pieces of decoration. When the drinks arrive, Mark lifts his glass and says that Lena is the most fun partner he has ever had. He talks about late nights at the office, after-work drinks, and creative sessions that run long into the evening. He does not mention me once. As the night goes on, I mostly listen. I hear stories about trips the agency wants to plan, about a beach resort that offers group packages, about how much fun it would be to go for a whole week to disconnect from reality. Lena's eyes shine when she talks about it. She leans against the table, close to Mark, as if my presence is just another chair. At one point, when there is a small pause in the conversation, I quietly ask Lena if she remembers that we still have a loan for the kitchen renovation, and that a week at a beach resort is not exactly low cost. I do not say it to kill the mood, I say it because we share a budget, or at least I thought we did. She turns to me with a sharp look and laughs, but the laugh is cold. She tells the group that I am always counting coins and that sometimes she feels like I am her father, not her husband. Someone jokes that at least her other partner knows how to have fun, and they all glance toward Mark, including Lena. My face gets hot, but I keep my voice calm. I remind her that I am not trying to control her, just to avoid debt. She rolls her eyes and tells everyone that I once suggested we cancel a small weekend trip because of an electricity bill. They laugh again. To them, this is entertainment. I realize I have become the responsible clown in this group, the one who pays the bill and receives the punchline. Later, when the waiter brings the next round of drinks without anyone asking who will pay, I already know the answer. I reach for my wallet because it is easier than waiting for the awkward silence. I hand over my card, and the waiter walks away. Mark pats me on the shoulder and says that I am a true gentleman. The word sounds less like respect and more like a label for someone who can be used. Before we leave, I try once more to speak to Lena away from the noise. Near the entrance, where the music is softer, I mention that Mark seems a bit too close for someone who is just a friend. I keep my voice neutral. I do not accuse her. I simply say that his hands are on her a lot, and that it makes me uncomfortable. She laughs loudly, the sound echoing in the hallway, and tells me I am jealous because he is more exciting than me. She says that if I cannot handle her having a friend like Mark, then maybe I should go file something at the court, instead of whining. I stand there, holding my jacket, listening to her words float in the dim light. She kisses me on the cheek quickly, like someone greeting a distant relative, and returns to the group. On the way home, the tram is almost empty. I watch my reflection in the dark window. A man with tired eyes, a man who pays bills and fixes broken things, a man who no one fears losing. When I get back to the apartment, the kitchen is exactly as we left it. I wash the few morning dishes and wipe the counter because small order makes me feel a little less useless. I think about the bar, about Mark's hand, about the laughing faces. I think about the way Lena threw around the idea of divorce like it was nothing more than a joke. While I stand there, sponge in hand, I feel a small vibration on my wrist. My smartwatch screen lights up with a reminder I completely forgot I had set years ago. 4 simple words appear in the corner of my vision. Review prenup and property file. Underneath, it says, Daniel only. The reminder on my wrist glowed for a few seconds, and then faded when I tapped it away. But the words stayed in my mind like a small stone in my shoe. I had set that reminder years ago, back when Lena and I first signed papers in a notary's office, and I wanted to make sure everything was in order. Life became busy, and I ignored it again and again. That night in the kitchen, after the bar, I stood there with wet hands and realized how long I had been postponing the simple act of looking at the documents that described the structure of my own life. I did not open any folders that night. Instead, I rinsed the sponge, turned off the light, and went to bed next to a woman who smelled of perfume and smoke that did not come from my world. Lying in the dark, I thought about how far we had moved from the beginning, and my mind slid back to the early days as if searching for proof that it had once been different. When I first met Lena, she was not the woman laughing in bars while her colleague's hand rested on her back. She was a tired junior marketer sitting on a broken chair at a small event, where my company's systems had crashed. I was sent to fix the problem on site. While I worked on a dusty server in a corner, she brought me tea without being asked and apologized for the chaos. even though it was not her fault. She told me she liked that I stayed calm while everyone else was panicking. At that time, she said that my quiet nature made her feel safe. She had just come out of a high-drama relationship with a man who treated arguments like sport. She said she was done with chaos and wanted peace. We started seeing each other after that event. At first, our dates were simple: cheap cafes, long walks, movies at home. She teased me gently about my old phone and my lack of social media, but back then it sounded affectionate, almost admiring. She told her friends that I was the responsible one, the grown-up in the room. I remember feeling proud when she introduced me that way. Our relationship moved quickly because I was already in my mid-30s, and she did not like wasting time. I had been working in IT for many years and had saved almost every extra coin. I did not buy new gadgets, did not go on expensive vacations, did not eat out very often. While my colleagues upgraded their phones every year, I put money aside. When I finally bought the apartment, it felt like a medal for all the overtime and weekend shifts. The realtor shook my hand and told me I was doing well for my age. My mother cried on the phone when I told her. A few months later, when Lena moved in, she said she admired my discipline. Then came the conversations about a prenup and property papers. It was not a romantic part of our story, but it was a rational one. I had already paid most of the apartment's price before we met. My mother and my accountant friend both told me it was wise to separate pre-marriage assets from anything that would come later. Lena agreed at the time without much discussion. She said she understood that I had worked for this home long before she entered my life. We went to a notary office, signed the documents, and left with a folder of papers. She even joked that if we ever divorced, she would just take the cat and her clothes. We laughed. Back then, it sounded like a harmless line, not a foreshadow. In the early years, she kept calling me her rock, her anchor. She told others that I brought balance to her impulsive nature. When her job became demanding, I cooked more often, cleaned more often, did laundry, paid bills, kept track of due dates. I did these things willingly because I thought that was what partners did for each other. The first small signs of disrespect arrived quietly, like hairline cracks in a wall. She started spending more time with colleagues after work, especially when her agency landed big clients. At first, she always invited me, and sometimes I went. Those nights, she would drink a little too much, but she still held my hand on the way home. Then, slowly, invitations stopped coming so often. She would say that tonight was just a quick brainstorming with the team, nothing special. Or she would say that it was a girls' night. When I checked social media later, I sometimes saw photos of mixed groups, including men I did not know. When I asked her about them, she said I was being paranoid. She told me that the marketing world was different and that networking looked like socializing. I accepted that explanation, partly because I did not want to be the stereotype of the jealous husband, and partly because I trusted the version of her from our early days. As the years went by, the jokes about me changed color. Friends who had once called me steady started calling me old-fashioned. Lena began to use words like grandpa and dinosaur when I refused to go clubbing on a work night. She said it in public and then added that she was just joking, that I was too serious and needed to relax. Each time, the group laughed, and each time, I felt the laughter aim a little deeper. When she started working more closely with Mark, I only knew his name from stories about her office. She said he was loud but fun, that he kept the energy high in the team. She mentioned that he went to the gym every day and that everyone loved him during campaigns. At first, it sounded like normal work talk. Then his name started coming up more often. She would tell me that Mark saved the presentation, that Mark helped her with a client, that Mark sent her memes during boring meetings. I noticed she smiled down at her phone a lot more while we watched movies. When I asked who it was, she usually answered that it was the agency chat. Later, when I saw his face for the first time in person at a small company party, I understood why he was so confident. He moved like someone who believed the room belonged to him. He shook my hand with a strong grip, looked past me quickly, and focused on Lena again. That night, he made a joke about me being the IT guy who guards the cables while they create magic. Everyone laughed, including Lena. She did not defend me, she just clinked glasses with him. I remember walking home after that party in the cold night, wondering when exactly I had been moved from partner to background. The pattern grew stronger over time. She would cancel dinner with me because she had to stay late at the office, then post photos a few hours later from some bar with her colleagues. When I mentioned it the next day, she said I was exaggerating and that she needed to keep up with networking if we wanted her career to succeed. She often reminded me that my salary, while stable, would never shoot up like hers could if she climbed the agency ladder. It was hard to argue with that logic, so I did not. I just noticed the ratio of effort changing. I was still doing the chores, still paying a larger share of the basic bills, still being the backbone. She was now the one traveling, drinking, and collecting compliments. One evening, long before the bar scene with Mark's hand on her back, we were at a family dinner at her sister Ira's apartment. The table was full. Roasted chicken, salads, wine, jokes. Her parents had come, and they sat at one end, talking about neighbors and medical stories. I sat near the middle, passing plates, filling glasses, and answering questions about work. Ira asked if I ever felt jealous of Lena's busy social life. I said honestly that I sometimes wished we had more time together. Lena laughed and said there was no reason to be jealous because she always came home in the end. She added that I should be grateful she still chose to live with someone as boring as me. The words were wrapped in humor, but I saw my mother-in-law hesitate for a second. Even she seemed unsure if the joke had gone too far. Later that night, while I washed dishes with Ira in the kitchen, she told me in a quiet voice that I should not take Lena's jokes too seriously. She said Lena was restless and that I was good for her. The message was clear: stay patient, endure. Keep being the stable one. Over and over, that was the role everyone assigned me. Then came the night that truly marked the start of the week-long trip idea, even before I fully recognized it as a disaster. We were at a different bar, one that Lena liked because the cocktails were full of fruit and the chairs were uncomfortable but stylish. Several of her agency friends were there, including Mark. The topic turned to vacations, and someone mentioned a beach resort that offered package deals. Mark got excited and started describing the place with glowing language. He talked about clear water, all-inclusive food, and endless cocktails. Lena's eyes shone like a child's. She said she needed a break from normal life, a week to feel alive. Someone joked that she should leave her husband at home with his servers and just go with the people who knew how to party. The group looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I smiled politely and said that trips were expensive and that we still had other responsibilities. I did not say no. I simply reminded her that we needed to plan, not rush. Lena made a big show of being offended. She raised her voice and told everyone that I was always counting coins, that I would probably calculate the cost of oxygen if I could. The table laughed. Mark leaned in and said that if she wanted to go, she should go, and that life was short. Then Lena looked straight at me across the table. Her face flushed from the drinks and attention, and said that if I had a problem with her taking a week to enjoy herself with friends, I knew where the courthouse was. She told the whole table that if I did not like it, I could file for divorce. The words hit me harder than any joke. For a moment, the noise of the bar faded, and all I heard was the echo of that sentence in my head. Some people laughed, thinking she was being dramatic. Someone clinked a glass and called her brave. I sat there, holding my drink, realizing that the idea of divorce was now not just a dark thought whispered in private arguments. It was a public tool in her hand, held up for everyone to see. After that night, the words about divorce did not leave my head, even when I pretended they were just another one of her dramatic lines. On the tram home, I tried to tell myself that she had only been joking to impress her colleagues, that she did not really want me to walk into a courthouse. Still, the way she had looked at me when she said I knew where it was, and the way everyone laughed, made it feel different from the usual teasing. It sounded less like a joke and more like a dare. At home, she behaved as if nothing important had happened. She moved around the kitchen, took off her makeup, and talked about a campaign at work. When I brought up the moment when she mentioned divorce at the table, she waved it away. She said people said extreme things when they were having fun and that I should stop clinging to every little sentence. She claimed that she only meant that she deserved some freedom to travel and relax. I listened, sitting at the edge of the bed, and realized that in her story I was already the controlling husband, even if I did not raise my voice. A few days after that, she started talking more seriously about the beach resort. She would show me photos on her phone of white sand, blue water, and smiling people holding cocktails under umbrellas. She told me that the agency might organize an informal work retreat, a kind of team-building week where ideas would flow better because everyone would be relaxed. When I asked if spouses were included, she laughed and told me that it was not that kind of event. She said it was more like a creative camp for the core team and that I would be bored to death anyway. I suggested we plan a shorter trip together later, maybe just a weekend somewhere closer and cheaper, something we both could enjoy without blowing the budget. She accused me of trying to limit her world. She said I wanted her to live in a loop between the office and our small kitchen. She reminded me again that her income could grow if she built strong relationships with clients and colleagues, and that these kinds of trips were part of that process. I knew it was easier to push back against that argument when you had no numbers on your side, and I did not want to sound like I was scared of her success. So I backed off. I told her that if it was truly connected to work, and if her boss agreed, then she should do what she thought was right. She took my hesitation as permission. The following week, she became busy with preparations. She bought new swimsuits, dresses, sandals, Packages started arriving at our door, and I carried them inside. When I raised an eyebrow at the number of new items, she said these were investments in her image, that in marketing appearance was part of the job. She also mentioned that Mark and a few others were definitely going, and that they had already planned excursions, boat rides, and parties. She did not hide his presence. In fact, she repeated his name more often, as if testing how much I would accept. At work, my own days remained ordinary. I kept servers running, answered tickets, and listened to small complaints. A younger colleague asked if I was excited for Lena's trip. He had seen her social media posts about it. When I told him I was not going, he made a low whistle and said he could never let his girlfriend travel for a week with just friends like that. Then he laughed and added that I must be more confident or more tired than him. I smiled with the corners of my mouth but said nothing. It was interesting how the people who mocked me for being old-fashioned also privately admitted they would not accept what I was accepting. The day of the trip arrived faster than I expected. Early in the morning, I carried Lena's suitcase down the stairs while she moved lightly behind me with her handbag. She wore a bright dress that I had never seen before, her hair perfectly styled, her nails freshly done. She smelled like expensive perfume and sunscreen. In the taxi to the airport, she was glued to her phone, laughing at messages from the agency chat. I watched the city slide by outside the window and tried to ignore the strange weight in my chest. At the airport departure terminal, we stood in a line that moved slowly toward the check-in counters. People around us dragged suitcases, spoke in excited voices, and took selfies. Lena finally put her phone away for a moment, only to adjust her sunglasses and check her reflection in the glass wall. When we reached the front, I placed her suitcase on the scale, answered a few practical questions from the staff, and stepped aside. At that moment, Mark appeared behind us, pulling his own suitcase. He greeted Lena loudly, hugged her, and then nodded in my direction with a small, polite smile that never reached his eyes. He joked that they were going to survive a week of hard work in paradise. Lena repeated that line like it was something clever. While they chatted, I stood there feeling like a driver dropping off two people who belonged to the same movie, while I was an extra from a different one. When it was time to head to security, I tried one last time to say something honest. I told Lena quietly that I still did not like the idea of her being away for a full week with colleagues, especially with one man who was clearly closer to her than others. I kept my voice controlled and my words simple. She rolled her eyes and told me I was overthinking everything. She claimed it was purely work, and that only insecure men tried to lock their wives at home. She added that she had already said it before. If I had such a serious problem with her taking this trip, I knew what kind of building handled that problem. She meant the courthouse again. She said it in a casual tone, not even lowering her voice. Then she turned toward Mark and made a light comment about jealous husbands in general, not only me. He laughed. For the second time, divorce was thrown in my face like a silly option in a game. I watched her walk toward the security checkpoint with him, dragging her carry-on behind her, laughing at something he showed her on his phone. They disappeared behind the line of people and metal detectors. As I stood there, surrounded by strangers, I realized that something inside me had finally settled. It was not rage, it was a clear, cold line drawn in my mind. I understood that if she could treat my feelings like this in public, then the version of our marriage I still held onto existed only in my head. The trip that was supposed to scare me into submission instead pushed me into a kind of calm I had not felt in years. The drive home from the airport felt both long and empty. At the apartment, her things were still everywhere. Makeup on the bathroom shelf, shoes in the hallway, half-finished coffee pods near the machine. The silence felt heavy but honest. Later that day, I opened social media and saw that she had already posted a picture from the airport lounge with a drink in her hand and a caption about finally escaping routine life. Mark was in the background of the photo, smiling widely. Comments from her friends praised her for taking time for herself. I looked at the image for a few seconds and then closed the app. The first night without her in the apartment was strangely peaceful. I made a simple dinner, washed the dishes, and sat on the couch with my laptop. There was no tension in the air, no waiting for her to come home late, no guessing which story she would use this time. I went to bed at a normal hour and slept more deeply than I expected. The next day, more photos appeared. The resort looked exactly like the advertising banners. Bright pool, long beach, people in swimwear everywhere. In some shots, Lena was with a group. In others, it was just her and Mark, sitting side by side at the bar, his arm resting behind her on the chair. The captions were full of phrases about freedom, creativity, and living life to the fullest. While she was living to the fullest, charges from the resort started appearing in our joint banking app. Drinks, spa treatments, excursions. I watched the numbers grow like a quiet, automatic leak. At work, between tasks, I felt a growing need to see something I had avoided for too long. When my shift ended, I did not go straight home. Instead, I drove to the rented garage where I kept old boxes and tools. It was a small, cold space smelling of dust and oil. In the corner stood a metal cabinet with a safe inside. Years ago, I had placed important documents there after we signed them: the purchase agreement for the apartment, the prenup, insurance papers. I opened the cabinet and pulled out the safe. My hands did not shake. They were steady, like when I worked on a fragile server. I entered the code, heard the soft click, and opened the heavy door. Inside were folders, neatly labeled, a little yellow from time but still intact. I sat on a folding chair, the only piece of furniture in that space, and opened the folder with our marriage documents. There it was, the prenup that separated the apartment from future shared property, the papers that stated clearly that I had bought this home before our marriage and that it remained my personal asset. I read the lines slowly, like I was seeing them for the first time, even though I knew their meaning from back then. I realized that while Lena had been building a story in which I was the boring, powerless husband, the actual legal framework of our life told a very different story. The law did not care about who had more followers or who laughed louder at the bar. It cared about signatures, dates, and ownership. Sitting there with the papers in my hands, I felt something like relief. Not happiness, but a sense that I was not as trapped as I had believed. I put the documents back into the folder, placed them gently in the safe, and closed it again. Before leaving, I locked the metal cabinet and leaned my back against it for a moment, listening to the quiet of the garage. There were no voices telling me I was too serious. No music from bars. Just my breathing and the distant sound of traffic outside. I pulled out my phone, thinking I might call my mother. Instead, I first opened my messages. There, near the top of the screen, was an unread text from my colleague and friend Ole. He had sent it while I was driving. The message was simple. He wrote that if I ever needed a serious lawyer, he knew a good one and could set up a meeting whenever I felt ready. I stared at Ole's message for a long moment in the cold light of the garage. It was only one sentence, but it felt heavier than the thick folder in the safe. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not joke or add emojis. He just offered help, the kind that comes from someone who pays attention even when you think nobody notices. I leaned against the metal cabinet and thought about how many times I had told myself to be patient, to endure, to wait for Lena to grow out of her phase. Now, looking at the message, I realized that it was not just a phase. It was a direction, and I was the one standing still while she walked away. I replied with a short text asking if we could talk that evening. He answered almost instantly, suggesting we meet near the supermarket where we both sometimes shopped after work. It was close to my route home and neutral, just a parking lot with bad lights and shopping carts. When I arrived, the sky was already dark, and the air smelled of wet asphalt. Cars came and went, people pushed carts, no one paying attention to two men standing near an old sedan. Ole was leaning against his car, hands in his pockets, a plastic bag with groceries at his feet. He did not ask stupid questions like whether I was sure something was wrong. Instead, he simply asked how bad it was, and I told him in simple lines. I did not need to dramatize anything, the facts were enough. I told him about the bar, about Mark's hand, about the jokes, about the sentence with the courthouse. I told him about the airport, the week-long trip, the social media photos, the charges on the joint account. I told him that I had opened the safe and reread the prenup, and that I suddenly saw my situation differently. He listened without interrupting much, nodding quietly every now and then. When I finished, he sighed and said that it sounded like I had been trying to keep the roof from falling while everyone else was loosening the beams. Then he repeated what he had written in the message. He said he knew a good family law attorney who did not play games, a man who liked clear documents more than emotional speeches. He added that talking to him did not force me to do anything, it would just give me information and options. Information and options. Those were the exact things I felt I had lost in my own home, where every conversation turned into a performance and every concern became jealousy. Standing in that parking lot, under a flickering light, I realized that I trusted Ole more in that moment than my own wife. I agreed to meet the lawyer. The next afternoon, I took a few hours off work, telling my supervisor I had a personal appointment. He did not ask many questions. He knew I rarely took time off. I walked through the city toward the lawyer's office with the folder from the safe in my bag. The building was an old stone block with small plaques next to the door, listing different firms. The office of the attorney was on the third floor, simple, with modest furniture and clean walls. It did not look like a place where people played with emotions. It looked like a place where people sorted them into legal shapes. The lawyer, Mr. Kovalenko, was older than me, with gray hair and calm eyes. He shook my hand, asked me to sit, and invited me to tell my story from the start. I tried to keep it short, but once I began, the details poured out. He did not react with shock or judgment. He just took notes in straight lines on a pad. When I finished, he asked a few specific questions. When did we marry? When did I buy the apartment? How was the prenup structured? Whose name was on which accounts? He asked if we had children. When I answered no, his expression did not change, but I saw a small adjustment in how he organized his notes. Then he asked to see the folder. I placed it on the desk and watched as he opened it carefully. He studied the prenup, the title deed, and some of the bank papers. He did not read every word out loud. He just traced parts with his pen and nodded slowly. When he spoke again, his voice was even, like someone explaining the rules of a game I had been playing without knowing them. He said that the apartment was clearly mine, that the prenup protected it strongly, and that any attempt to claim it as joint property would be difficult at best. He said that her week-long disappearance with another man, combined with social media evidence and misuse of joint funds, painted a very specific picture, especially since she had threatened divorce herself in front of witnesses. He talked about possible outcomes if I chose to file for divorce, and how the law would likely see the situation. He did not push me, he simply laid out the map. Listening to him, I felt both comfort and a small sadness. Comfort, because I realized that I was not helpless. Sadness, because needing a map meant admitting that I might leave the road I had walked for years. He suggested that, for now, we quietly collect clear evidence without provoking a direct conflict. Screenshots of posts, records of transactions, messages where she used certain phrases. He said we could prepare a petition and a plan without filing it immediately, giving me time to decide. He also advised that I protect myself financially as soon as possible, in ways that were allowed and fair. That meant adjusting how my salary entered joint or personal accounts and limiting access to funds she could use for another escape from routine. When I left his office, the sky was still light, but my world felt different. The chaos of emotions had been translated into lines on paper and possible steps. I did not feel victorious or vengeful. I felt like someone who had finally found the manual to a machine he had been operating blindly. My next stop was the bank. The branch near my office was quiet, with soft music and the faint smell of paper and plastic. I sat down with a clerk and explained that I wanted to redirect my salary from the joint account to a personal one and adjust some limits. I did not mention cheating, or photos, or beach resorts. I spoke in numbers and terms the language banks understand. The clerk processed the changes without asking for reasons. Within half an hour, my financial reality had shifted. Joint cards now had lower limits. My income would land in a place Lena could not reach without my consent. It was not revenge, and it was simply me stopping the constant leak that had turned our shared effort into her personal show. That evening, I went home and opened social media again. More photos had appeared. In one, she sat on the edge of a pool, legs in the water, Mark standing behind her, his hands on her shoulders. The caption said something about working hard and team effort. Comments joked about them being the perfect duo. In another, they clinked glasses at sunset, the sea behind them. I started taking screenshots of everything: names, dates, locations, emojis, all captured and stored in a simple, numbered way. I moved them into folders on my laptop and backed them up to a drive I kept separate. It felt like doing an audit of a failing system, except this time the system was my marriage. In the following days, I continued my normal routine on the surface. I went to work, answered emails, solved problems. When coworkers mentioned the sunny weather, I nodded. When someone showed me a video of a funny cat, I smiled. What they did not see was the quiet file structure growing on my laptop, the slow gathering of small, undeniable pieces. At some point during that week, my phone rang with my mother's number. She asked how I was. I hesitated for a moment and then told her more truth than usual. I did not describe every detail of the bar or the resort, but I said that Lena had gone away for a week with a colleague and that the situation was not healthy. My mother was silent for a moment, then asked if I had talked to a professional. When I told her about the lawyer, she did not scold me. She simply said that a man has the right to protect his home and dignity. She reminded me that she had raised me to be calm, not to be a doormat. On the last day of the trip, Lena's family invited me for dinner again. They said it would be nice to eat together and welcome her back the next evening. I went, bringing a simple dessert from a bakery. At Ira's apartment, the table was set similarly to before, but the mood was slightly different. Her parents asked about my work. Her sister asked if I had seen the resort photos. I said I had. There was a pause that stretched a little too long. Then Ira laughed nervously and suggested that maybe I should loosen up and join such trips one day. My mother-in-law said that modern couples were more flexible, that trust meant allowing freedom. I listened, cut my meat, and chewed slowly. Then I told them, in a plain voice, that I had met with a lawyer during the week. The forks paused above plates. I did not yell or dramatize. I simply said that I wanted to understand my rights regarding the apartment and our finances, and that I was tired of divorce being waved in my face like a party joke. Ira raised her eyebrows and asked if I was thinking of leaving. I answered that I was thinking of protecting what I had built before anyone arrived. I added that no final decision had been made, but that I would not stay in a story where I was both the punchline and the wallet forever. Her father looked down at his plate, her mother looked uncomfortable, and Ira gave a small shrug, saying that Lena sometimes went too far with her jokes. Nobody told me I was wrong to seek information. They just did not know what to do with a version of me that wasn't silently absorbing everything. When I left their apartment, the stairwell felt tight and smelled of cooking oil. Outside, the evening air was cool. As I walked to the bus stop, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out and saw an email notification from the lawyer. The subject line mentioned a draft strategy for property protection and a possible petition, ready for review before Lena returned. I stood on the sidewalk after reading the subject line, the glow of the screen reflecting off my hand. The email from the lawyer was short and formal, saying that a draft plan for property protection and a possible divorce petition was ready for my review. It did not tell me what to feel. It only confirmed that invisible gears were now in motion, moving slowly in a direction I had quietly chosen. I put the phone back in my pocket and walked home with a strange sense of calm. Inside the apartment, the silence felt almost gentle. No loud music from the bathroom, no constant message sounds, no perfume cloud hanging in the hallway. Just the hum of the fridge and the soft ticking of a clock I rarely noticed. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and then opened the email from the lawyer properly. There were attachments and bullet points, clear lines about what would happen with the apartment, with the accounts, with any shared belongings. It was strange to see my life turned into sections and items like that, but also strangely comforting. Everything had a place, a rule, a path. I read through it slowly, twice, and then wrote back asking a few practical questions about timing and process. He replied within an hour, answering each point in simple language. He explained when documents could be filed, how they would be delivered, and how to handle the moment when Lena came home. He did not tell me to do it or not do it. He simply gave me the tools to decide. Over the next day, I moved through tasks as if I were preparing for a major system upgrade at work. I knew that if I rushed or got emotional, mistakes would creep in, so I treated it like a project. In the morning, I adjusted a few remaining financial details that the lawyer had suggested. I made sure certain automatic payments were rerouted to my personal account and that notifications were set up for any unusual activity. I did everything legally, nothing hidden, but I no longer left the doors wide open. At work, I informed my supervisor that I might need a day off soon for personal reasons. He looked at me for a moment, then said he hoped everything would be all right and that they would manage without me for a day. I could tell he suspected something big was happening because I rarely asked for time away. He did not pry, and I was grateful. That evening, I went back to the garage. This time, I did not open the safe for documents. I opened a different cupboard where we had stored travel items. A long time ago, when we still believed in shared vacations, I had bought a set of matching suitcases for us. We used them only a couple of times, and then they gathered dust. I pulled them out, brushed them off, and carried them to the car. Back at the apartment, I stood in the bedroom and looked around. Lena's side of the wardrobe was full of clothes chosen for different versions of herself. Office professional, party guest, beach tourist. I did not try to sort her things by memory or story. I simply followed the lawyer's advice to pack what was clearly hers, leaving anything that might become a point of legal detail for later. I laid the open suitcases on the bed and began folding clothes carefully. It felt almost like preparing for another trip, except this time the destination was not a resort, but a new life outside my home. I placed her dresses, shoes, makeup, and small personal items inside, closing each zipper slowly. When I finished, there were 2 large suitcases and 1 smaller bag. I set them upright near the bedroom door and stared at them for a long moment. These shapes meant something final now. In the hallway, I cleared space by the front door and moved the bags there. Anyone stepping into the apartment would see them immediately. They looked like punctuation marks at the end of a long, messy sentence. The next step was arranging the setting where everything would be said out loud. I could have chosen to confront her alone in the apartment, but the lawyer's email had suggested a neutral place with witnesses, somewhere that her version of events would be harder to twist. So I called a small restaurant in our neighborhood, one we had visited a few times in better years. I asked if their private back room was available on the evening of her return. The manager confirmed that it was and asked what the occasion was. I told him it was a family dinner to clear the air after a tense week. That was true, even if the air would be cleared in a way he did not imagine. After booking the room, I called my mother. I told her the date and time and asked if she could come. She did not hesitate. She said she would be there and that she was proud of me for handling things calmly and properly. There was no talk of revenge or drama, only of dignity. Next, I contacted Ira. I said it would be good for Lena to see her sister and parents at a quiet dinner when she returned, so we could all talk like adults instead of gossiping in smaller groups. Ira sounded unsure at first. She asked if something serious was planned. I told her that serious conversations would happen either way, and that it was better if they took place in a room with a table and chairs instead of in hallways and on phones. She agreed and said she would bring their parents. I did not tell her that the lawyer would also be there. That piece of information stayed in my pocket. Finally, I messaged the lawyer and explained my idea. I gave him the time and place and asked if he could attend quietly, not as a roaring advocate, but as a calm witness and guide. He replied that it was unusual but not unreasonable, and that he would come, sit near the end of the table, and speak only when needed. With all these elements set, there was nothing left but waiting. The day before Lena's return, I did a final check of the apartment. I made sure valuable items were stored safely. I backed up my folders of screenshots and bank records to an external drive and placed it in the safe. I checked the locks and the mail. On the surface, everything looked like it always had. The same couch, the same kitchen table, the same bed. But underneath, everything had shifted. On the morning of her flight home, I woke up earlier than usual. My body knew that something important was approaching even before my mind fully woke. I went for a walk through the neighborhood, noticing small details I usually ignored. The chipped paint on a fence, the way an old man fed pigeons near the tram stop, the quiet buzz of a shop being opened. It felt like my last day as a man, pretending he had no choices. When I came back, I showered, shaved, and put on clothes that were simple but neat. Not formal, not casual, just respectful. I wanted to look like someone who took himself seriously. Around midday, my phone buzzed with a message from the airline app confirming that her flight had taken off. I imagined her in the seat, tanned and tired in a pleasant way, scrolling through photos of sunsets and cocktails, thinking only about how she would brag about the week to her friends. I wondered if she believed I would be standing at the door with open arms, ready to forget everything, because she smiled. The hours between that message and the time of the dinner were slow but steady. I prepared a small bag with my documents, a copy of the prenup, a copy of the property title, some printed screenshots, bank records. I did not plan to wave them dramatically. I just wanted them within reach in case her version of reality drifted too far from the truth in front of our families. When the time came, I locked the apartment, leaving the suitcases by the door like silent guards, and walked to the restaurant. Inside, the private back room felt warm and carefully arranged. A long table with a plain white cloth, simple plates, glasses, a carafe of water. The room was set for a normal family evening, but to me it felt like a small, quiet courtroom without a judge. My mother arrived first, wearing her best jacket, the one she kept for important occasions. She hugged me and said in a low voice that whatever happened tonight, I should remember I was not alone and not crazy. Shortly after, Ira and her parents came in. They greeted my mother politely and sat down, looking around the room with a slight tension in their faces. Ira asked if Lena knew about the dinner. I said yes. I had mentioned a family meal to welcome her back and talk. Her father cleared his throat and said it was good to talk, that misunderstandings got worse in silence. I thought about how many years I had spent in that silence, losing ground. A few minutes later, the lawyer entered, carrying a modest leather folder. I introduced him as someone assisting with our legal questions. The air in the room shifted as everyone understood that the conversation would not be light. Still, no one stood up to leave. They stayed seated, eyes moving between him and me. We ordered a few simple dishes and drinks, more out of habit than hunger. My mother sipped water, Ira twisted a napkin in her hands, her parents whispered to each other in short phrases. The lawyer sat at the end, quietly reviewing some notes, not demanding attention. I checked my watch. The flight should have landed by now. The restaurant was not far from our apartment, and I knew how long it took to get there by taxi. While we waited, I thought about all the times people had laughed when Lena joked about divorce, about how they had assumed I was too soft to ever draw a line. I realized I felt no need to prove anything to them in a dramatic way. The plan was simple: present reality, present boundaries. Let consequences follow the rules already written. Around the time our food arrived, my phone vibrated on the table. Everyone looked at it, as if we all knew who it would be. I saw a message from Lena saying that she had landed safely and would be home in about half an hour. She added a small joke about needing a shower and a real meal after resort food. I read it once and did not reply. I put the phone down next to my plate. A few minutes later, while we were sitting in tense silence, there was a soft chime from the main door of the restaurant, a small bell that rang whenever someone walked in from the street. The soft chime from the front door reached the back room like a small bell at the end of a long tunnel. Everyone at the table went quiet. My mother put down her glass. Ira stopped twisting her napkin. Her parents straightened in their chairs. The lawyer closed his folder with one calm movement and rested his hands on it. I realized in that second that I was the only person in the room whose heart rate did not suddenly jump. Footsteps moved through the restaurant, voices murmured, and then the door to the private room opened. Lena stepped inside like someone entering her own stage. She was tanned, her hair styled in loose waves, a light dress flowing around her legs. A pair of sunglasses rested on her head. She smiled wide when she saw everyone, her parents, Ira, my mother, me. She spread her arms and said that this was a surprise and that she felt like a celebrity after a long tour. Her voice was bright and light. She moved around the table, kissing cheeks, hugging her parents, touching Ira's shoulder, brushing her lips against my face quickly as if nothing had changed. She did not sit down immediately. She started a stream of words about the resort, the weather, the food, the sea. She said that the pictures online did not show even half of the beauty. Then she mentioned Mark with a laugh, saying that he was the life of every evening, and that without him, the trip would have been boring. I watched her face while she spoke, and saw no sign of doubt yet. To her, this gathering was just another chance to talk about herself. When she finally sat opposite me, she noticed the lawyer at the end of the table. She frowned slightly and asked who he was. I said, in a steady voice, that he was a family law attorney, and that he was there to help us talk in a clear and adult way. Her smile froze for the first time that evening, then tried to restart. She said that this was dramatic and unnecessary, that she had just come back from a work retreat and wanted a normal meal, not a courtroom. I told her that this room was not a courtroom, but that some things needed to be said and written, not just thrown like jokes in bars. I added that for a long time I had swallowed those jokes, but that I had chosen to stop. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms, still trying to look amused. She told everyone that I had always been too serious, that she had only gone on a team-building trip, and that some husbands would be proud that their wives were valued enough to be invited. Her mother nodded weakly, as if she wanted to agree but felt the tension. Her father looked at me, then at the lawyer. My mother said nothing. I did not raise my voice. I simply said that we all knew this was not about a simple work trip. I reminded her that she had told me, in front of colleagues, that if I had a problem with her week away with just a friend, I knew where the courthouse was. I reminded her that she had repeated that idea at the airport, again in front of Mark. I said that she had turned divorce into a punchline and my feelings into a running joke. She rolled her eyes and said that everyone used dramatic words sometimes, and that I was clinging to phrases instead of looking at the big picture. She tried to speak to her parents, telling them that I had always been jealous and limited, and that now I was acting like a victim because she dared to travel. The lawyer cleared his throat gently. He did not interrupt like a loud defender. He simply introduced himself to the table and said that he had reviewed our documents. He stated, in calm phrases, that I had purchased the apartment before the marriage, that a prenup had been signed years ago, and that the property remained legally mine. He said that, from a legal standpoint, my position regarding the home and certain finances was strong. The room grew quieter. Ira's eyes widened. Her parents shifted in their chairs. Lena looked at me and then at him, her expression turning from amusement to annoyance. She said that this was a nasty move, that I was trying to trap her with paper. I replied that I was not trapping her with anything. I said that I was simply choosing to stand on the ground I had built, instead of letting her erase it with a few loud lines. I took a simple folder from my bag and placed it on the table. I did not throw it. I did not push it toward her dramatically. I just opened it and pulled out some printed pages. On the first page was a grid of screenshots from her trip. Photos of her at the pool with Mark's hands on her shoulders. Photos of them at the bar at sunset. Captions about escaping routine and living life to the fullest. Dates and times clearly visible. I slid that page toward the middle of the table so everyone could see. Her mother put a hand to her mouth. Her father leaned closer. Ira stared at the paper, then at Lena. I said that these were not rumors, not my fantasies, but her own posts, her own words. I reminded her that these moments had been paid partly with money from a joint account while she mocked my coin counting. Then I added a printed summary of the bank transactions from that week. I did not list every number out loud. I just pointed to the row of resort charges, spa payments, and bar tabs. I said that while she was ordering cocktails with a man who was just a friend, I was sitting in a quiet apartment watching our shared balance drop. She started to speak, to explain, to say that I was making it look worse than it was. She said it was all part of the team event, that pictures could be misread, that everyone knew social media was exaggerated. I did not argue about feelings. I stayed on facts. I said that she had chosen to spend a week away with that man, that she had chosen to push divorce in my face as an option if I disliked it, and that she had chosen to return and behave as if nothing serious had happened. I said that I had chosen something too. I told her that during her trip I had met with a lawyer, reviewed our prenup, and made a decision. I looked at her directly and told her that I had signed divorce papers and that they were ready to be filed. For the first time, her face truly changed. The tan on her skin made the sudden paleness around her mouth even more clear. She asked if I was serious. I told her that I was, and that this dinner was not a negotiation about whether the divorce would happen. It was an information session about how it would happen and what it meant for living arrangements. I said that the apartment would remain mine according to the document she had once signed willingly. I said that joint accounts had already been adjusted and that she would not wake up to surprises because I had acted within the law, not behind it. The lawyer confirmed this in simple terms, saying that nothing I had described violated any rule. He explained in a neutral tone that Lena would need to find a new place to stay and that I was not legally required to let her remain in the apartment that belonged to me. Ira finally spoke. She said that she had warned Lena many times not to play with threats of divorce, that she had told her not to push me that hard. Her voice was not angry, just tired. Her father said that what he was seeing in the photos was not simple team building. Her mother looked down, avoiding everyone's eyes. Lena was not laughing now. She tried a different angle. She said that we could talk in private, that this scene was unnecessary, that we could work it out if I calmed down. I answered that I was calm, that this was exactly what calm looked like after years of being dismissed. I said that there would be no screaming, no broken plates, no begging. There would only be a line, and we were standing on it now. I told her that I had already packed her clothes, shoes, and personal items into suitcases. I said that they were waiting near the restaurant cloakroom, ready to leave with her tonight. Her eyes filled with something like anger and fear mixed together. She said that I had no right to pack her things without asking. The lawyer answered that packing her belongings into suitcases did not violate her rights, as long as nothing was being destroyed or stolen. He said it was simply preparation for a necessary move. I added that anything unclear or contested could be sorted later, slowly, with lists and calm discussions, but that tonight the core change would start. My mother reached out and placed her hand over mine on the table. She did not give a speech. She just squeezed, a small sign that I was not crazy for wanting respect. I stood up slowly and adjusted my chair. I told everyone that I did not ask them to pick sides tonight. I said that they could support her as family if they wanted, that they could believe any story they needed to sleep at night. I only insisted on one thing. I would not continue in the role of the quiet husband who pays for the show and laughs at his own humiliation. I told Lena that after this dinner, she would not be coming back to live with me. She could collect her suitcases from the hallway and decide her next steps. I said that if she tried to twist the story and call me abusive or controlling, I would answer only with dates, documents, and numbers. No dramatic posts, no shouting, just the same facts I had put in front of them now. The room felt heavy as I pushed in my chair. No one jumped up to block the door. Ira looked at her sister with something like regret. Her father looked smaller, her mother older. The lawyer remained seated, quietly observing, ready to answer any question they might ask after I left. Lena started speaking quickly, her words tripping over each other. She said that we had good moments, that she had only wanted some fun, that people sometimes made mistakes. Her voice trembled. I listened long enough to know that nothing she could say would change the basic shape of reality now. Then I nodded once, more as a farewell to the years I had given than to her. I thanked everyone for coming, including her parents, Ira, my mother, and the lawyer. I said that the meal was on me, and that there was no need to argue about the bill, because this would be the last time I paid for a gathering that revolved around her version of events. Then I turned and walked to the door. As I stepped into the hallway, I saw the suitcases standing neatly near the cloakroom, exactly where I had asked the staff to place them when I arrived earlier. Their handles were upright, waiting for a hand that was not mine. I walked past them without touching them. The main door of the restaurant opened with a small sound, and the cool night air wrapped around me. Behind me, I could still hear Lena's voice through the walls, louder now, mixed with other voices trying to calm or question. I did not turn back. I took my phone from my pocket, opened her contact, and pressed the option to block calls and messages. There was a soft click in the system, a small confirmation sound in my hand, and then only the quiet of the street and the rhythm of my own footsteps as I walked away.